The cruelest thing Victoria Calloway ever did wasn't destroying her son's marriage. It was inviting the woman he still loved to watch him marry someone else. The crystal chandeliers scattered warm gold light across the ballroom of the Crown Meridian Hotel in downtown Sydney, turning the marble floors into rivers of reflected fire, while Sydney's elite drifted between white rose arrangements and champagne towers worth more than most people's yearly rent. Every inch of the room smelled of old money. Imported orchids, expensive perfume, fresh linen, the kind of luxury designed to remind ordinary people they didn't belong. Ethan Calloway stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Sydney Harbor, his black tuxedo perfectly tailored against his broad shoulders, his silver cufflinks catching the glow of the ballroom lights each time he adjusted the sleeve that suddenly felt too tight around his wrist. At 39, the billionaire CEO of Calloway Group looked exactly like the business magazines loved to describe him. Controlled, powerful, untouchable. The kind of man investors trusted and strangers stared at for too long. But tonight, there was something dangerously absent behind his steel blue eyes. Peace. The guest list has been finalized, his mother said smoothly beside him. Victoria Calloway barely looked old enough to have a son Ethan's age. Her champagne-colored gown shimmered under the lights as she scanned the ballroom with cold satisfaction, inspecting every detail as if she personally owned the city itself. Good, Ethan answered quietly. His voice carried the exhaustion of a man who hadn't slept properly in months. Victoria noticed instantly. She always noticed weakness. Vanessa is upstairs with the stylists, she continued. You should go see her. The press photos begin in 20 minutes. Ethan loosened his jaw slightly. I'll be there. His mother's sharp gaze lingered on him for a moment too long. You're making the right decision. He gave a humorless smile. That's what everyone keeps telling me. Across the ballroom, waiters in white gloves floated silently between guests carrying trays of champagne while a string quartet played near. The grand staircase. Everything was flawless, elegant, soulless. Ethan stared toward the entrance doors without really seeing them. His reflection stared back faintly through the glass windows behind him. Tall, composed, empty. The wedding rehearsal dinner should have felt like the beginning of something. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a life he no longer recognized. Still thinking about her? Victoria asked softly. Ethan's fingers tightened around the champagne glass. Just slightly, but enough. No, he lied. Victoria smiled like someone admiring damage she personally created. Good. 5 years earlier, Charlotte Hayes had walked out of the Calloway estate carrying nothing except a single suitcase and the last pieces of her dignity. Victoria had made sure of it. The tabloids called it a quiet divorce between Australia's golden CEO and his beautiful wife. Quiet. As if heartbreak ever happened quietly. Ethan still remembered the sound of Charlotte crying in the hallway outside his office, while his mother insisted she wasn't sophisticated enough for the Calloway name. He remembered staying silent because silence was easier than choosing sides. Easier than disappointing the woman who built his empire beside him after his father died. Easier than admitting he loved his wife more than he feared losing his inheritance. And by the time he realized what his silence had cost him, Charlotte was already gone. You invited everyone important? Ethan asked eventually, still staring toward the ballroom entrance. Victoria took a delicate sip of champagne. Of course. Then she added casually, including Charlotte. The world seemed to stop breathing for half a second. Ethan turned slowly. What? Victoria's expression remained perfectly calm. Relax. It's not scandalous for an ex-wife to attend a wedding. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. You invited Charlotte here? I thought closure would be healthy for everyone. But Ethan knew his mother too well. Victoria Calloway didn't believe in closure. She believed in victory. Why would you do that? He asked quietly. Because, Victoria replied, lowering her voice slightly as guests drifted nearby. Some women need to see they've been replaced before they finally let go. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. She already let go. Victoria's smile faded almost imperceptibly. Then this shouldn't matter. But it did matter. More than Ethan wanted to admit. Because despite the billions in his accounts, despite the headlines and skyscrapers and endless meetings, there were still nights when he woke up reaching across empty sheets expecting to find Charlotte sleeping beside him. There were still songs he couldn't hear without remembering her laughter in the kitchen of their first apartment before money complicated everything. There were still moments when success felt unbearably lonely because the only person he'd ever truly wanted to share it with was gone. Ethan looked down at his untouched champagne. Did she respond? Victoria adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist. Actually, she paused deliberately. She accepted. His heartbeat stumbled hard enough that he physically felt it. She's coming tomorrow? Apparently so. Victoria's voice cooled further. Although I can't imagine why. Pride, perhaps. Curiosity. Regret. Ethan barely heard the rest. Charlotte was coming. After 5 years of silence. 5 years of avoiding interviews. Avoiding public events. Avoiding him. She was finally walking back into his world. Somewhere behind them, guests laughed near the ballroom bar, while cameras flashed softly against the marble walls. The wedding planner hurried across the room with a clipboard pressed against her chest. Everything continued moving exactly as it should, but Ethan suddenly couldn't breathe properly. Because for the first time since agreeing to marry Vanessa Whitmore, he realized something terrifying. A part of him had secretly believed Charlotte would never come back. And now she was. He looked again toward the ballroom entrance, as if expecting her to appear immediately. But only strangers moved through the golden light. Victoria touched his arm gently, her voice almost affectionate. You'll thank me eventually. Ethan didn't answer. Because deep down, beneath the billion-dollar image and perfect public composure, something inside him had already started breaking. The rain tapped softly against the windows of Charlotte Hayes's small coastal cottage as early morning light slipped through linen curtains and painted pale gold across the wooden kitchen floor. The house smelled faintly of vanilla pancakes and sea salt drifting in from the open window above the sink. It was the kind of quiet home wealthy people romanticized in magazines, but would never survive living in for more than a weekend. Small, imperfect, real. Charlotte stood barefoot at the stove wearing an oversized cream sweater with the sleeves pushed above her elbows, while steam curled gently from the frying pan in front of her. Her blonde hair was tied loosely back. Those soft strands kept falling around her face no matter how many times she tucked them away. She looked nothing like the polished society wife Sydney once photographed beside Ethan Callaway at charity galas and corporate dinners. That woman had disappeared years ago. This version of Charlotte was softer somehow. Stronger too. The kind of strength that came quietly after surviving disappointment alone. Mommy, Noah took the blue cup again. Lily announced dramatically from the kitchen table. Because you always take the dinosaur spoon. Noah shot back while clutching the offending cup to his chest like priceless treasure. Charlotte turned slightly, fighting a smile she could not quite hide. Maybe, she said calmly, flipping another pancake. The world will continue spinning even if we use different cups for one morning. Noah narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. You say that every time. Because every time it is true. Lily giggled first. Then Noah did too. Their laughter filled the cottage instantly, warm and alive and impossible not to love. Charlotte glanced toward them for a brief second, and her chest tightened the way it always did when she looked at her children for too long. Ethan's eyes. Both of them had Ethan's eyes. The exact same impossible shade of blue-gray that once made headlines whenever photographers captured him leaving board meetings or charity events. Sometimes the resemblance hurt so much she physically had to look away. Other times, it felt like the only reason. She survived losing him. Her phone buzzed softly against the kitchen counter. Charlotte froze the moment she saw the sender. Victoria Callaway. Even after 5 years, the name alone still carried a strange chill. She stared at the screen without touching it. The message preview remained visible beneath the expensive embossed wedding invitation already sitting unopened near the fruit bowl. I do hope you are still attending tomorrow evening. Charlotte slowly placed the spatula down. Noah noticed first. Mom. She forced a smile immediately. Nothing, sweetheart. But her hands betrayed her. Slight tremble. Tiny. Almost invisible. Still there. Lily climbed off her chair and wandered toward the counter, her pink socks sliding against the wooden floorboards. Is that from Dad? The word landed gently inside the room. Dad. Charlotte swallowed carefully. They knew his name. They knew who he was. But knowing and understanding were two completely different things. No, she answered softly. It is from Grandma Victoria. Noah frowned immediately from the table. The mean one. Charlotte closed her eyes for half a second. Noah. But she is. His small voice softened slightly. You said we should not lie. Children had a terrifying habit of protecting truth more honestly than adults ever did. Charlotte turned back toward the stove before they could see emotion crossing her face. Outside, waves crashed faintly somewhere beyond the dunes lining the beach road. The cottage windows rattled gently from the coastal wind. Everything about this life was quieter than the world she used to live in with Ethan. Smaller, simpler, safer. But some wounds did not stay buried just because you moved near the ocean. Charlotte picked up the invitation slowly. Thick ivory paper, gold lettering. Ethan Alexander Calloway and Vanessa Whitmore request the honor of your presence. Her stomach twisted again exactly the same way it had when the envelope first arrived 4 days earlier. At first she thought it was a mistake. Then she recognized Victoria's cruelty hidden beneath the formality. Some women need to see they have been replaced before they finally let go. Charlotte could practically hear her saying it. The truth was, Charlotte had let go a long time ago. Or at least she had tried to. But healing was strange. Some days she genuinely believed she no longer loved Ethan. Then she would hear an old piano song in a grocery store or catch sight of a silver Mercedes that looked like his, and suddenly grief would return sharp enough to steal her breath. "Mommy," Lily tugged lightly on her sleeve. "Are we really going to the wedding?" Charlotte looked down at her daughter. Lily's blonde curls framed a face so heartbreakingly similar to Ethan's childhood photographs that strangers occasionally stopped and stared too long in supermarkets. "Yes," Charlotte answered quietly. Noah looked confused. "Why?" "Because your father deserves to know you exist. Because secrets were poisoning all of them slowly. Because Ethan Calloway had spent 5 years believing his mother controlled his future when the truth was far uglier than that." Victoria had given Charlotte a choice the night she left the Calloway estate. Leave quietly, and Ethan keeps the company his father built. Stay, and watch him lose everything defending you. At the time, Ethan had been fighting investors, board pressure, and his father's recent death all at once. Charlotte still remembered Victoria's voice in the library that evening. Cold, elegant, merciless. "You are the one complication my son cannot afford." And Charlotte had believed leaving was an act of love. Then 2 weeks later, she discovered she was pregnant. With twins. Her fingers tightened around the wedding invitation now as memory pressed painfully against her ribs. She never told Ethan. At first because she was terrified. Then because too much time passed. Then because she convinced herself that children deserved peace instead of growing up inside the poisonous Calloway empire. But deep down, another truth haunted her. Part of Charlotte feared Ethan would choose his mother again. "Will Dad be happy to see us?" Noah asked suddenly. The question cut deeper than anything else that morning. Charlotte stared toward the rain-speckled kitchen window where gray clouds drifted slowly above the ocean horizon. Her voice came out softer than intended. "I do not know." Silence settled briefly across the kitchen. Even the rain seemed quieter. Then Lily reached for Charlotte's hand. "I think he will." Charlotte looked down at her daughter and nearly broke apart right there beside the stove. Because children still believed love could fix things adults had already destroyed. The rain had stopped by late afternoon, leaving the coastal air cool and silver beneath a sky slowly clearing over the Pacific. Charlotte stood alone on the narrow wooden deck outside the cottage, one hand wrapped around a mug of untouched tea, while sea wind lifted strands of blonde hair across her face. The ocean stretched endlessly beyond the dunes, restless and gray beneath fading sunlight. 5 years ago, she used to think money solved uncertainty. Then she married into the Calloway family and discovered wealthy people were often the most frightened people of all. Inside the cottage, cartoons played softly from the television while Noah and Lily argued over crayons at the coffee table. Their small voices drifted through the fly-screen door behind her, warm and ordinary and painfully precious. Charlotte closed her eyes briefly at the sound. Tomorrow those children would walk into Ethan's world for the first time, and everything would change. Her phone buzzed again against the deck railing beside her. Another message from Victoria. "I do hope you understand how important tomorrow is." Charlotte stared at the words for several seconds as a slow, familiar dread tightened inside her chest. It was not the sentence itself. It was the control hidden beneath it. The invitation had never been about courtesy, and it had never truly been about closure. Victoria wanted Charlotte inside that ballroom because humiliation looked cleaner when it wore white gloves. Charlotte opened the thread again, rereading every polished line Victoria had sent over the last 4 days. Not once had Ethan written. Not once had anyone asked what Charlotte wanted. Once again, everyone was arranging her pain without asking her permission. Mommy. Charlotte turned sharply. Noah stood barefoot in the doorway holding his stuffed shark beneath one arm, his blonde hair messy from the sea breeze drifting through the cottage. You look sad again. Charlotte forced a gentle smile immediately. I am all right. Noah studied her carefully with the uncomfortable perception children sometimes carried naturally. You do that thing with your mouth when you are pretending. Charlotte laughed softly despite herself. Ethan used to notice that too. The thought arrived suddenly and unwelcome. Noah wandered closer onto the deck, the wooden boards creaking beneath his tiny footsteps. Is Grandma Victoria angry at us? Charlotte's stomach tightened. Why would you ask that? Noah shrugged one shoulder awkwardly. Because she never wanted to meet us before. Children noticed everything adults tried desperately to hide. Charlotte crouched slowly in front of him, brushing windblown hair away from his forehead. None of this is your fault, sweetheart. I know. His voice lowered slightly. But sometimes I think maybe Dad does not want us. The sentence shattered something quietly inside her. Charlotte inhaled slowly before pulling him gently into her arms. Noah curled against her instantly, small and warm and trusting despite all the confusion surrounding his existence. Listen to me carefully, she whispered into his hair. Your father is not a bad man. Then why did he never come? Charlotte closed her eyes tightly. Because love sometimes loses against fear. Because powerful families know how to turn loyalty into chains. Because Ethan Calloway spent his entire life trying to become the kind of son his mother approved of, and somewhere along the way he forgot how to fight for himself. But none of those answers belonged to a 5-year-old little boy standing barefoot on a weathered deck overlooking the ocean. Sometimes adults make mistakes they regret later, she answered softly instead. Noah leaned back enough to look at her. Do you still love him? The wind seemed to disappear for half a second. Charlotte stared at her son in complete silence. Children should not ask questions that dangerous. Yet somehow they always did. Finally, she smiled sadly. I loved who your father used to be. Noah considered that carefully with the serious expression Ethan wore. During investor meetings. The resemblance was almost painful now. Maybe he is still that person, Noah said quietly. Before Charlotte could answer, Lily burst through the doorway wearing pink gumboots and holding 2 glitter-covered drawings in her hands. Mommy, look. She nearly tripped over the deck step in excitement. Charlotte steadied her automatically. Careful. Lily shoved one drawing upward proudly. 3 stick figures stood beside a taller fourth one under a yellow sun with enormous, uneven rays stretching across the page. It is us at the wedding. Charlotte's smile faltered slightly. You drew Daddy. Lily nodded enthusiastically. Because tomorrow we finally meet him. Charlotte stared down at the picture while emotion rose sharply into her throat. Children carried hope so recklessly. They trusted love before receiving proof it deserved trust at all. She looked toward the ocean again as waves crashed softly against the distant shoreline below the cliffs. Somewhere nearly 100 kilometers away, Ethan was probably standing beneath crystal chandeliers surrounded by politicians and executives discussing floral arrangements and stock prices, while photographers documented every expensive detail of the wedding. He had no idea 2 children with his eyes existed. No idea his mother had manipulated the entire situation again. No idea tomorrow would destroy the careful future everyone built around him. Charlotte suddenly remembered the last conversation she ever had with Ethan inside the Calloway estate. Rain hammered against the mansion windows while moving boxes sat near the front staircase untouched. Ethan stood beside his office doorway still wearing his charcoal suit from work, exhausted from another 16-hour day handling investors after his father's death. Why are you doing this? He had asked quietly. Charlotte remembered gripping her coat, sleeves tightly, so he would not see her hands shaking. Because your mother is right. Ethan looked genuinely wounded by that. Charlotte, you belong in this world, Ethan. Her voice broke slightly, even now remembering it. And I do not. She had waited for him to fight harder, to choose her anyway. But Ethan only stood there torn between love and loyalty while silence filled the enormous marble hallway around them. And sometimes silence became its own answer. Lily climbed onto Charlotte's lap now, wrapping tiny arms around her neck, while Noah leaned quietly against her shoulder beside them. The three of them stayed there together beneath the cooling evening sky as waves rolled endlessly against the shore below. Safe. For one final night, Charlotte held her children tighter as fear settled heavily inside her chest. Because tomorrow was not simply a wedding. It was a collision between two lives that were never supposed to meet again. And deep down, she already knew somebody's heart would not survive it intact. The morning of the wedding arrived wrapped in pale winter sunlight and sharp ocean wind that rattled the cottage windows before dawn. Charlotte had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan standing at the altar beside another woman, while Noah and Lily looked up at him with hope they did not yet understand could break them. The kettle whistled softly in the kitchen while she stood motionless beside the sink wearing a navy blue dress she had not touched in almost 4 years. It was simple, elegant, the kind of dress designed to disappear quietly inside wealthy rooms. Victoria would hate that Charlotte still looked beautiful without trying. The thought came bitterly before she could stop it. "Mommy, are rich weddings really like movies?" Lily asked from the hallway while dragging a tiny suitcase almost larger than herself across the wooden floorboards. Charlotte glanced over her shoulder. Lily wore a pale cream cardigan over her blue dress, while Noah struggled angrily nearby with the buttons of his tiny navy blazer. The sight nearly shattered her heart. Ethan would have smiled seeing them dressed like this. "Some rich weddings are," Charlotte answered softly. "Most are just expensive people pretending to be happy." Noah frowned immediately. "That sounds sad." Charlotte gave a small laugh beneath her breath. "Sometimes it is." The drive into Sydney took nearly 2 hours along wet coastal roads lined with eucalyptus trees still dripping from last night's rain. Gray clouds hung low over the motorway while soft piano music played quietly through the car speakers. Noah fell asleep halfway through the drive with his forehead pressed against the window, but Lily remained awake beside Charlotte in the back seat asking endless questions about Ethan. "What was Daddy like when you met him?" Charlotte tightened her grip slightly around the steering wheel. Outside, the city skyline slowly emerged through mist and morning traffic ahead. "He was kind," she answered after a moment. "Very kind." Lily smiled immediately. "I knew it." Charlotte swallowed carefully. "He used to buy hot chocolate from the same cafe every morning before work." "That is how you met." Charlotte nodded faintly. "I worked there while finishing university." She could still remember the first time Ethan walked through those cafe doors wearing a charcoal overcoat, while rain soaked the streets outside. He had smiled at her like she was a person instead of background noise. Wealthy men usually looked through people. Ethan looked directly at them. That was what made loving him dangerous. "Did you know he was rich?" Noah asked sleepily without opening his eyes. Charlotte smiled sadly. "Not at first." "What happened when you found out?" Charlotte watched Sydney Harbor drift into view through the windshield, glittering cold beneath the cloudy sky. "Nothing changed," she whispered. But that had not been true for long. By the time they reached the Crown Meridian Hotel, photographers already crowded near the entrance barricades, while luxury cars rolled steadily beneath the covered marble driveway. The entire hotel shimmered with white floral arrangements and gold lighting visible even through the towering glass windows. Charlotte's stomach tightened instantly. This was Ethan's world. Polished. Controlled. Impossible to breathe inside for too long. Noah sat upright suddenly the moment they stopped. "Whoa." Lily pressed both hands against the window. "It looks like a castle." Charlotte parked farther away from the main entrance to avoid cameras. Her fingers trembled slightly while turning off the engine. For several seconds nobody moved. The silence inside the car felt fragile somehow. Then Noah spoke quietly from the back seat. "Mom." Charlotte looked at him through the mirror. "Yes." His small face looked nervous now. "What if he does not like us?" The question stole every ounce of air from her chest. Charlotte turned fully in her seat to face them. "Listen to me carefully." Her voice softened immediately. "None of this changes who you are. You are loved. Completely. No matter what happens today." Lily reached for Noah's hand. Charlotte nearly cried watching it. Children comforted each other so instinctively when adults failed them. Outside, flashes from cameras reflected against the hotel windows, while wealthy guests stepped from luxury cars in gowns and tailored suits worth more than Charlotte's yearly rent. Somewhere inside that building, Ethan was probably adjusting his cufflinks while assistants fixed floral arrangements around him, completely unaware his life was seconds away from splitting apart forever. Charlotte inhaled slowly before opening her door. Cold city air rushed instantly inside the vehicle, carrying distant music and the faint scent of expensive perfume drifting from the hotel entrance. Her heels clicked softly against wet pavement as she walked around the car toward the children. Noah stared up at the towering hotel nervously while Lily clung tightly to Charlotte's hand. "Ready?" Charlotte asked gently. Noah nodded first, even though fear remained visible across his small face. Lily copied him immediately. "Brave for each other." Charlotte smiled softly despite the panic rising inside her chest. Together they crossed the driveway toward the entrance while hotel staff opened massive glass doors beneath warm golden light spilling from inside. Conversations echoed softly across the marble lobby. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead like floating fire. Somewhere deeper inside the ballroom, a string quartet played delicate classical music beneath hundreds of wealthy voices. Noah slowed suddenly beside her. "Mom." Charlotte looked down. His blue-gray eyes searched hers anxiously. What if Daddy already has another family now? The question hit harder than anything else that morning. Charlotte crouched slowly beside him despite the polished marble floor beneath her knees. "Then we will still be all right," she whispered carefully. "Because families are not built by money or fancy weddings." Her throat tightened painfully. "They are built by love." Noah stared at her for a long moment before nodding once. Lily wrapped both tiny arms around Charlotte's neck unexpectedly. "I am glad you are our mommy." Charlotte closed her eyes instantly as emotion crashed through her chest sharp enough to hurt. For one dangerous second, she almost turned around. Almost took them home before any damage could reach them. But then a familiar voice drifted coldly across the lobby behind her. "Charlotte." Every muscle in her body froze. Slowly, she stood and turned toward the grand staircase, where Victoria Calloway descended beneath crystal light, wearing a silver designer gown and diamonds bright enough to blind half the room. Her expression remained calm, elegant, victorious. Then Victoria's eyes lowered toward the twins standing beside Charlotte. And for the first time since Charlotte had ever known her, genuine shock cracked across the older woman's face. For a single terrifying second, nobody moved. The soft violin music drifting through the marble lobby seemed impossibly distant now beneath the silence stretching between Charlotte Hayes and Victoria Calloway. Guests continued crossing the enormous foyer carrying champagne glasses and designer handbags, completely unaware the atmosphere around the four people near the grand staircase had changed entirely. Victoria's pale expression recovered first. Of course it did. Women like her built entire lives around emotional control. But Charlotte still saw it. That brief fracture. That instant of genuine panic when Victoria looked into Noah and Lily's faces and saw Ethan staring back at her through two small children she never knew existed. "You brought them," Victoria said carefully. Her voice remained polished enough that strangers nearby would hear nothing unusual. Charlotte straightened slightly beside the twins. "You said families were welcome." Victoria's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Lily stared upward curiously at the older woman dripping diamonds beneath the chandelier light. "Are you Daddy's mommy?" Several nearby guests glanced over immediately at the question. Charlotte's pulse spiked hard enough to hurt. Victoria lowered her eyes slowly toward Lily. "And you must be Lily." Charlotte froze instantly. "You know her name?" Victoria ignored the question entirely. Her attention shifted toward Noah now, studying him with frightening intensity. The same blue-gray eyes as Ethan. The same serious expression whenever nervousness settled in. Even his posture carried traces of the Calloway men before him. Victoria inhaled slowly. "How old are they?" Charlotte understood the real question beneath it. "How long have you hidden them from us?" "5," Charlotte answered quietly. Victoria looked away for half a second toward the ballroom entrance where wealthy guests continued arriving beneath golden light and camera flashes. Calculating. Rearranging the future inside her head in real time. Then her cold smile returned. "This is hardly the appropriate place for surprises." Charlotte felt anger rise sharply beneath her ribs. "You invited me here. I invited you." Victoria's gaze flicked toward the twins again. "Not an audience." Noah stepped slightly closer to Charlotte's side. Protective already. Ethan did that too whenever tension entered a room. "We are not an audience," Noah said softly. Victoria blinked once, almost startled by the child answering her directly. Charlotte gently rested a hand against Noah's shoulder before things escalated further. The last thing she wanted was for the children to absorb the poison woven through this family. "Mommy," Lily whispered loudly enough for Victoria to hear. "She looks angry." Charlotte nearly closed her eyes in defeat. Victoria's smile thinned further. "Children should learn discretion early. Children should learn kindness early too," Charlotte answered before she could stop herself. The words landed harder than intended. Several seconds passed between them beneath the towering crystal chandeliers overhead, while wealthy strangers drifted around the edges of a conversation none of them understood. Then Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Does Ethan know?" Charlotte stared directly at her. No, for the first time all morning, something unreadable crossed Victoria's face. Not guilt. Victoria Calloway probably abandoned guilt years ago, but perhaps fear. "You should leave before the ceremony begins," Victoria said quietly. Charlotte laughed softly in disbelief. "Interesting. Yesterday you wanted me here. Yesterday, I did not realize you intended to destroy my son's wedding." Charlotte felt her heartbeat quicken instantly. "I did not come here to destroy anything." Victoria's expression sharpened. "Then why are you here?" "Because Ethan deserved truth. Because 5 years of silence had become unbearable. Because Noah asked last night if his father wanted him. Because Lily still drew pictures of a man she had never met." But Charlotte could not explain any of that to a woman who measured love in reputation and stock value. "I came because you invited me," she answered simply. Victoria studied her carefully for a long moment before speaking again. "You always were naive." Charlotte almost smiled at that. "No, I was in love." Something flickered in Victoria's eyes then. Irritation perhaps. Or memory. Before either woman could continue, movement at the top of the staircase suddenly shifted the atmosphere across the lobby. Several guests turned upward immediately. Whispers spread softly beneath the violin music. Ethan appeared near the upper landing wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, while 2 assistants spoke quietly beside him. Even from a distance, he carried that same impossible presence Charlotte remembered too well. Tall, controlled, effortlessly powerful. The kind of man entire rooms adjusted around without realizing it. Charlotte stopped breathing for half a second. It had been 5 years since she last saw him in person. Photographs were cruelly insufficient. Ethan looked older now. Not physically older exactly, just heavier somehow. Like success had slowly exhausted him from the inside. His gaze moved absently across the lobby while listening to one of the assistants speaking beside him. Then suddenly he stilled. Charlotte felt the exact moment he saw her. Even from across the enormous marble foyer, she felt it physically. Ethan's entire body froze at the staircase railing. The assistant beside him continued speaking for another few seconds before noticing Ethan was no longer listening. Around them, conversations softened instinctively as nearby guests recognized tension spreading silently through the room. Charlotte's pulse hammered violently now beneath the navy fabric of her dress. Ethan stared directly at her like the rest of the world had vanished. 5 years collapsed instantly between them. Rain outside their first apartment. Sunday mornings making coffee together. Her crying quietly in empty hallways while his mother dismantled their marriage piece by piece. Ethan took one slow step downward before stopping again. Because only now did he notice the children standing beside her. Charlotte watched confusion cross his face first. Then disbelief. Then something far more dangerous. Recognition. Noah looked up curiously toward the staircase. "Mommy," he whispered softly. "That man looks exactly like me." The entire lobby seemed to stop breathing. The silence inside the hotel lobby stretched so tightly it almost felt visible. Ethan Calloway remained frozen halfway down the grand staircase while guests nearby exchanged confused glances beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers overhead. Charlotte could hear the faint clinking of champagne glasses somewhere behind her. Soft violin music continued drifting through the ballroom entrance, as though the world had not just tilted violently off balance. But Ethan's eyes never left the twins. Noah stared upward with open curiosity, while Lily hid partly behind Charlotte's leg, peeking cautiously toward the tall stranger standing motionless on the staircase. Ethan looked like a man trying to solve an impossible equation inside his own head. The resemblance was undeniable. It was there in Noah's eyes, in Lily's pale blonde curls, in the exact shape of their expressions whenever uncertainty touched them. Charlotte watched realization move slowly across Ethan's face, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Shock first, then confusion, then something deeper, something dangerous. "Ethan," Victoria said sharply under her breath, finally stepping forward. Her voice carried warning hidden beneath elegance. Ethan barely seemed to hear her. He descended the remaining staircase steps almost mechanically while the assistants behind him exchanged uncomfortable looks. Every polished inch of his billionaire composure had vanished now beneath something rawer. Human. Charlotte's pulse thundered painfully against her ribs as he approached. 5 years of silence suddenly reduced to the few meters separating them across the marble floor. Ethan stopped directly in front of her. For one suspended moment, nobody spoke. Charlotte forgot how breathing worked. Up close, Ethan looked exhausted in ways cameras never captured. Tiny lines near his eyes. Tension held permanently in his shoulders. The look of a man who carried responsibility too long without rest. But his eyes remained exactly the same. The same impossible blue-gray that once convinced Charlotte she would be safe loving him. Ethan opened his mouth slightly before closing it again. Then finally his voice came quiet enough that only she could hear it. Charlotte. Hearing him say her name after 5 years nearly destroyed her. "Hello, Ethan." He stared at her as though trying to confirm she was real. "You came." Charlotte almost laughed at the absurdity of that statement. Your mother seemed determined. Ethan's gaze flicked briefly toward Victoria before returning immediately to the twins beside her. Noah straightened slightly beneath the attention while Lily pressed closer to Charlotte's side. Ethan looked physically incapable of looking away from them. "Who are they?" he asked softly. Charlotte felt every muscle inside her body tighten. "Not here. Not like this." But before she could answer, Lily spoke first in her small, clear voice. "Mommy says it is rude to ask questions before introducing yourself." A few nearby guests smiled awkwardly at the child's comment, unaware they were witnessing the slow collapse of one of Sydney's most powerful families. Ethan blinked once. Then something astonishing happened. The tension around his mouth softened slightly. The first real emotion Charlotte had seen from him all morning. "You are right," he said gently. He crouched slightly, so he was closer to their height. "My name is Ethan." Noah studied him carefully with cautious seriousness. "I am Noah." "And I am Lily," she added proudly. Ethan nodded slowly, but Charlotte could see his hands trembling almost imperceptibly near his sides now. He already knew. Maybe not logically yet, but somewhere deeper than logic, he knew. Victoria stepped forward quickly before silence could become revelation. Perhaps this conversation should happen privately. Her tone sharpened toward Charlotte. Away from guests. Ethan finally looked at his mother fully. "What is going on?" Victoria's expression remained controlled, though Charlotte noticed the tension building beneath it. "This is hardly the appropriate moment." Ethan ignored her completely. His eyes returned to Charlotte. "Who are these children?" Charlotte opened her mouth, closed it again. The entire lobby suddenly felt suffocating beneath the chandeliers and whispers surrounding them. She had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways over the years. Angry, tearful, catastrophic. But she never imagined Ethan looking at the twins like someone discovering oxygen after drowning. "Mommy," Noah asked quietly beside her. Charlotte looked down instinctively. "Yes, sweetheart." Noah pointed. The silence inside the lobby did not break all at once. It cracked slowly, like glass under pressure. Ethan remained frozen halfway down the marble staircase while hundreds of tiny reflections from the crystal chandeliers trembled across the polished floor beneath him. His gaze stayed locked on Noah and Lily with an intensity that made Charlotte's pulse pound painfully against her ribs. Around them, conversations softened into nervous whispers as guests sensed something intimate and dangerous unfolding inside the perfect wedding atmosphere. Noah looked up again toward Ethan, confusion visible across his small face. "Mommy," he whispered carefully, "why is he staring at us like that?" Charlotte opened her mouth, but no words came. "Because he sees himself in you. Because some truths do not need introductions. Because Ethan Calloway had spent 5 years unknowingly walking past children who carried his entire face." Ethan finally descended another step. Then another. Slow. Unsteady. Like his body no longer trusted the ground beneath him. Victoria moved instantly beside Charlotte, lowering her voice sharply. "This ends now." Charlotte tore her eyes away from Ethan long enough to face her. No, Victoria's composure fractured for the first time. You do not understand what this will do to him. Charlotte almost laughed at the hypocrisy burning inside her chest. No, I understand exactly what silence already did to him. Nearby guests openly stared now. Phones appeared discreetly near handbags and tuxedo pockets. Wealthy people loved scandal almost as much as they feared becoming it. At the top of the staircase, Vanessa Whitmore finally appeared wearing a fitted ivory gown draped elegantly beneath layers of diamonds and soft white silk. Her dark hair fell in polished waves around perfectly sculpted makeup designed for magazine covers and society pages. She looked breathtaking, untouchable, completely unaware her future had already begun collapsing beneath her feet. "Ethan," she called softly from above. Ethan did not answer. He never looked away from the twins. Vanessa followed his gaze downward toward the lobby floor. Charlotte watched confusion touch her expression first, then discomfort, then complete stillness. Noah shifted nervously beside Charlotte. "Mommy," he whispered again, "is that Daddy?" The word landed loudly despite the quietness of his voice. Several guests inhaled sharply nearby. Vanessa's face lost color almost instantly. Ethan physically flinched hearing it. Charlotte closed her eyes briefly. There it was. The moment everything changed permanently. Lily smiled brightly before Charlotte could stop her. "Hi." She lifted her small hand toward Ethan in a shy little wave. Ethan stared at her like the world had stopped moving. Charlotte saw it happen in real time. The exact second denial became impossible. Lily had his smile, his eyes. Even the slight tilt of her head mirrored childhood photographs Charlotte once saw inside the Callaway Estate library. Ethan reached the bottom staircase, landing slowly now. His voice came out rougher than Charlotte remembered. Charlotte, just hearing him say her name again after 5 years nearly shattered every fragile wall she built around herself. She swallowed carefully. "Hello, Ethan." His eyes never left the twins. "Who are they?" Charlotte felt Noah's hand tighten around hers immediately. Fear. Children always recognized emotional storms before adults admitted they existed. Victoria stepped forward instantly. "Ethan, this is neither the time nor place." Ethan ignored her completely. His entire attention remained fixed on Charlotte now. "Who are they?" he repeated quietly. Charlotte looked directly into his eyes. "Your children." The ballroom doors behind them swung open somewhere in the distance as wedding staff continued preparing the ceremony, completely unaware the actual disaster had already arrived. Ethan did not move, did not blink. Charlotte watched shock travel visibly through him like a physical impact. "No," Victoria snapped suddenly. "You do not get to ambush him like this." Ethan turned sharply toward his mother for the first time. "You knew?" The question carried something dangerous beneath it now. Victoria hesitated 1 second too long. Ethan saw the answer immediately. "You knew," he repeated softer this time. Vanessa slowly descended several staircase steps behind him, gripping the railing tightly enough her knuckles whitened beneath polished nails. "Ethan," she whispered carefully, "what is happening?" Ethan still looked at his mother. "How long?" Victoria lifted her chin defensively. "I discovered the truth recently." Charlotte's anger surged instantly. "That is a lie." Ethan looked between them both, confusion and disbelief battling visibly across his face. "Charlotte," his voice nearly broke. "What does she mean?" Charlotte inhaled shakily. Every memory she spent years burying suddenly clawed upward all at once. The library, the rain, Victoria placing a check on the table like Charlotte's marriage had a price tag. "Your mother knew I was pregnant before I left," Charlotte said quietly. Ethan stared at Victoria in horror. "Tell him," Charlotte whispered. Victoria's elegant mask hardened immediately. "You were emotional, vulnerable. I did what was necessary to protect this family." Ethan looked physically ill now. "Protect us from what?" Victoria's eyes shifted coldly toward Charlotte. "From a woman who would have destroyed your future." Charlotte almost laughed from the cruelty of it. "I loved him." "You loved his weakness." Ethan stepped backward slightly, like he no longer recognized the woman standing in front of him. "Mom." Victoria straightened beneath the chandelier light. Every inch the untouchable Callaway matriarch. "Your father spent his life building an empire. I would not watch you throw it away for a cafe waitress who wanted a fantasy." Charlotte's face drained of color instantly. Noah frowned beside her. "That is mean," he whispered loudly enough for several guests to hear. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Shame crossed his face so sharply Charlotte nearly looked away. Because deep down he remembered every cruel comment. Every moment he stayed silent, while Charlotte absorbed humiliation alone inside his family's world. Lily tugged gently on Charlotte's sleeve. "Mommy." Charlotte looked down immediately. Lily's tiny expression had changed completely now. Confused. Hurt. Why is Grandma Victoria angry that Daddy is our daddy? The innocence of the question destroyed whatever fragile composure remained inside the room. Ethan's eyes filled instantly with something Charlotte had never seen in him before. Devastation. The silence after Lily's question felt almost sacred in its devastation. Even the string quartet inside the ballroom had stopped playing at some point, leaving only the faint clinking of champagne glasses and the distant murmur of confused wedding guests drifting through the enormous hotel lobby. Ethan stood motionless beneath the chandelier light, staring at his daughter, as though the entire world had narrowed down to one small child in a cream cardigan, asking why her existence made adults look frightened. Charlotte watched emotion move visibly across his face now. Shock, grief, wonder, regret so sharp it almost looked painful. Ethan lowered himself slowly to one knee in front of Lily, as if instinct had taken control before his mind caught up. His expensive tuxedo brushed against the polished marble floor without him seeming to notice. "Hi," he said softly. His voice had changed completely. Gone was the cold executive tone Charlotte remembered from boardrooms and interviews. This voice belonged to the man she fell in love with years ago inside a tiny cafe during a rainstorm. Lily looked shy suddenly. "Hi." Ethan smiled faintly despite the devastation still visible in his eyes. "I am Ethan." Noah frowned beside Charlotte. "We know." A few nervous laughs escaped nearby guests before silence swallowed the room again. Ethan looked toward Noah then, and Charlotte physically saw the exact moment fatherhood crashed into him completely. Noah's serious little expression mirrored Ethan so perfectly it almost felt cruel. Ethan swallowed hard. "You look just like me." Noah tilted his head thoughtfully. "Mom says I got your eyes." Ethan closed his eyes briefly like the sentence hurt him. Because it did. Charlotte knew it did. 5 birthdays. 5 Christmas mornings. 5 years of missing bedtime stories and scraped knees and tiny hands reaching for him without ever knowing his name. Ethan opened his eyes again slowly, looking between both children now with something heartbreakingly close to awe. "How old are you?" 5, Lily answered proudly. "We turned 5 in April." Ethan's expression cracked further hearing it. April. His favorite month. The month he used to take Charlotte driving along the coast just to watch autumn storms roll over the ocean. Vanessa stood frozen near the staircase above them, one hand gripping the railing tightly, while photographers nearby pretended not to stare. The bride looked less angry than lost now, like someone slowly realizing she had walked into the wrong love story entirely. Victoria noticed the shift instantly. "Ethan," she said sharply, regaining control of her voice. "This conversation belongs somewhere private." Ethan stood slowly without looking away from the twins. "Private?" His voice remained dangerously calm. "You hid my children from me for 5 years." Victoria lifted her chin. "I protected your future. You stole my family." The words landed across the marble lobby like shattered glass. Charlotte felt her breath catch immediately. Ethan had never spoken to his mother like that before. Ever. Victoria's expression hardened beneath the chandelier glow. "Do not embarrass yourself over sentiment." "Sentiment?" Ethan stared at her in disbelief. "They are my children." Nearby guests shifted uncomfortably now, while whispers spread faster through the ballroom entrance behind them. Charlotte noticed phones disappearing discreetly as people realized this was no longer entertaining gossip. This was heartbreak unfolding in public. Vanessa descended the final staircase steps carefully before stopping several feet away from Ethan. Her ivory gown shimmered softly beneath the crystal lights, but her face had gone pale. "Did you know?" she asked him quietly. Ethan looked at her finally for the first time since Charlotte arrived. No, Vanessa's eyes drifted toward Noah and Lily. Charlotte expected anger, jealousy. Instead, the woman looked deeply sad. "Oh my God," she whispered softly. Lily stared curiously at Vanessa's wedding dress. "You look like a princess." Vanessa blinked quickly, visibly caught off guard by the sweetness in Lily's voice. "Thank you." Then Lily asked the question nobody in the room was prepared for. "Are you the lady marrying our daddy?" Charlotte nearly stopped breathing. Vanessa looked at Ethan immediately. Ethan looked destroyed. Noah stepped closer beside Lily protectively. Mom said he did not know about us. Ethan physically flinched hearing that. Charlotte's chest tightened painfully, watching realization settle deeper into him with every innocent sentence the children spoke. Because children never understood how brutally honest they were being. Ethan turned slowly toward Charlotte now. You never told me. Charlotte held his gaze despite the tremor building inside her throat. I tried. Victoria inhaled sharply. Ethan's eyes shifted instantly toward his mother. Charlotte continued before fear could silence her again. The week after I left, I found out I was pregnant. Ethan looked like he had stopped hearing properly. I called your office. Victoria's face lost color for the first time. Charlotte, she warned softly. But Charlotte was done protecting powerful people from truth. Your mother answered instead. Ethan stared at Victoria in complete disbelief now. Charlotte's voice remained quiet but steady. She told me you were already moving on. That if I came back, your board would remove you after everything happening with your father's death and the investors. Ethan's jaw tightened visibly. Charlotte looked down briefly at Noah and Lily before forcing herself to continue. Then she offered me money to disappear permanently. Several guests audibly gasped nearby. Victoria stepped forward immediately. I did what was necessary for this family. Ethan looked at her slowly, like he no longer recognized the woman standing in front of him. You let me believe Charlotte abandoned me because she was weak enough to leave. Charlotte nearly laughed at the cruelty of it. But Ethan's next words stopped everyone cold. No, his voice shook slightly now. She left because I failed to protect her. Silence swallowed the lobby completely. Charlotte felt tears burn suddenly behind her eyes. Because in all the years she loved Ethan Calloway, he had never admitted that before. Not once. Noah looked between them both in confusion. Mommy, he whispered softly, why is Daddy sad? Charlotte opened her mouth carefully, but Ethan answered first. Because, he said quietly, kneeling again until he was eye level with the twins, I missed too much. Lily stepped closer without hesitation. Children always moved toward love faster than adults did. You can still come now, she said simply. Ethan's entire face broke apart. For several long seconds, Ethan could not speak. He simply stared at Lily standing in front of him beneath the chandelier light, with complete trust shining in her blue-gray eyes. You can still come now. The sentence was so small, so innocent, yet it tore through every carefully controlled wall Ethan Calloway had built around himself for years. Charlotte watched his throat tighten visibly as emotion overtook him faster than pride could contain it. Around them, the luxurious hotel lobby no longer felt elegant. It felt exposed, fragile, the kind of room where truth finally became too large to hide beneath expensive marble and designer gowns. Ethan lifted one trembling hand toward Lily carefully, almost like he was afraid she might disappear if he moved too quickly. Can I? He asked softly. Lily nodded immediately. Ethan rested his palm gently against her tiny shoulder, and Charlotte saw the exact moment fatherhood settled fully inside him. Not as an idea, not a shock, as love, immediate and devastating. Ethan inhaled sharply, eyes glistening now despite every attempt to maintain composure. Noah watched cautiously beside Charlotte. You really did not know about us. Ethan looked toward him instantly. No, his voice cracked slightly. I swear to you, I did not know. Noah studied him with painful seriousness for a 5-year-old child. Mom cried about you sometimes. Charlotte closed her eyes briefly in humiliation. Ethan looked shattered hearing that. Noah, she whispered softly. But Noah continued anyway, because children spoke truth before considering consequences. She always said you were good. Ethan lowered his head for half a second, like guilt physically weighed too much to carry upright. Vanessa stood completely still nearby, one hand resting against the staircase railing while wedding guests watched in horrified fascination from the edges of the ballroom entrance. Charlotte almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because Vanessa Whitmore had walked into a wedding expecting luxury and headlines, only to discover the groom's entire soul still belonged somewhere else. Ethan slowly stood again before turning toward Vanessa. The movement alone changed the atmosphere instantly. Charlotte sensed it before either of them spoke. The terrible understanding that one life was ending while another tried desperately to begin again. Vanessa met his eyes quietly. You love her. It was not a question. Ethan looked toward Charlotte instinctively before answering. That alone was answer enough. Vanessa gave a soft laugh, completely lacking humor. Wow. She blinked rapidly, fighting emotion beneath layers of perfect makeup and polished social training. All this time, Ethan stepped toward her carefully. Vanessa. She lifted one hand, gently to stop him. Do not. Her voice remained calm somehow, more wounded than angry. Please do not stand there looking at your children like that, and then try to explain this away to me. Ethan fell silent immediately, because there was nothing to explain. Charlotte looked down at the marble floor, suddenly feeling guilty for a disaster she never intended to create publicly. She came to tell the truth, not destroy another woman's future in front of cameras and strangers. But love had already done that long before today. Vanessa looked toward Charlotte then. Did you know he still loved you? Charlotte's chest tightened painfully. No. Vanessa searched her face carefully for dishonesty and apparently found none. That almost makes it worse. Nearby, Victoria stepped forward sharply before emotions could shift further out of her control. Enough. Her cold voice sliced cleanly through the room. This family discussion will happen privately. Ethan turned slowly toward her now, and Charlotte barely recognized the expression on his face. Because for the first time in their entire relationship, Ethan was no longer afraid of disappointing his mother. You do not get to decide that anymore. Victoria stiffened. Excuse me. Ethan's voice remained calm, but something fundamental inside him had changed. Charlotte could see it clearly now. The years of obedience, the endless need for approval, the fear of losing everything his father built. All of it was cracking apart beneath the weight of two small children calling him daddy. You lied to me, Ethan said quietly. For 5 years. I protected this family. No, Ethan shook his head slowly. You protected control. Victoria's eyes flashed sharply. Without me, you would not have any of this. She gestured toward the ballroom, the guests, the billion-dollar image surrounding them all. Ethan looked around the glittering hotel lobby, filled with people whispering behind champagne glasses and camera flashes. Then he looked down at Noah and Lily standing beside Charlotte in tiny formal clothes, nervous and confused, but still holding on to each other's hands. His voice lowered almost to a whisper. Then maybe none of this was worth it. The sentence landed like an earthquake beneath the silence. Charlotte physically stopped breathing hearing it. Victoria looked stunned, truly stunned, because Ethan Callaway had spent his entire life protecting the empire before himself, before love, before happiness. Until now. Noah tugged gently on Ethan's jacket sleeve. Ethan immediately looked down. Do you like football? Noah asked suddenly. The abruptness nearly broke the unbearable tension surrounding them. Ethan blinked once in confusion before a faint laugh escaped him unexpectedly. Yes. Noah's face brightened cautiously. Me too. Lily smiled immediately. Noah says he is going to play for Australia one day. Ethan looked at his son with visible wonder. That sounds ambitious. Noah lifted his chin proudly. Mom says I can do hard things. Ethan looked toward Charlotte again then, and the emotion in his eyes nearly destroyed her composure completely. Because she saw regret there, but also gratitude. Charlotte had raised their children with kindness instead of bitterness. Even after everything. A hotel employee approached nervously from the ballroom entrance holding a clipboard against her chest. Mr. Callaway, she whispered carefully. The ceremony is scheduled to begin in 10 minutes. The words hung heavily inside the lobby. Ceremony. Wedding. Future. Ethan stared silently toward the ballroom doors where hundreds of guests waited beneath white roses and golden candlelight, expecting him to marry Vanessa Whitmore in less than 10 minutes. Then he looked back toward Charlotte and the twins, his real family standing directly in front of him for the first time. Charlotte saw panic move across his face now, not because he feared scandal, because he finally understood the impossible choice standing before him. And deep down, everyone in the room already knew which choice his heart had made. The hotel employee still stood nervously near the ballroom entrance, clutching her clipboard, while silence spread heavily through the marble lobby. 10 minutes until the ceremony. 10 minutes until Ethan Callaway was supposed to walk down an aisle lined with white roses and promise forever to a woman he could no longer even properly look at. Ethan stared toward the ballroom doors like he was seeing them for the first time. The gold lighting spilling through the entrance suddenly looked artificial. Cold. Every expensive detail his mother spent months perfecting now felt painfully meaningless compared to two small children standing beside Charlotte. Noah tugged lightly at Ethan's jacket again. Are you really rich? Several nearby guests blinked in surprise at the abrupt question. Ethan looked down slowly, almost grateful for the innocence interrupting the emotional wreckage around them. I guess so. Noah considered that seriously. Mom says rich people are not automatically bad. Charlotte nearly closed her eyes. Ethan let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like a laugh despite the heartbreak crushing the room. Your mom sounds smart. She is. Noah nodded proudly. She works really hard. Ethan looked toward Charlotte instantly. The emotion in his face deepened further hearing that simple sentence. Because Charlotte Hayes had once dreamed of becoming an architect before marrying into the Callaway empire, swallowed her entire identity whole. Ethan remembered sketchbooks spread across their kitchen table late at night, while she talked excitedly about restoring coastal homes and designing spaces filled with natural light. Then slowly, year by year, she stopped drawing. Charlotte shifted uncomfortably beneath his gaze. The children are tired, she said quietly. We should go. Panic flashed across Ethan's face immediately. No, the word came too fast. Too honest. Charlotte froze. Ethan inhaled sharply before lowering his voice. Please. The room went still again hearing it. Ethan Callaway did not beg. Not investors. Not politicians. Not anyone. Yet here he stood in a tuxedo moments before his wedding asking his ex-wife not to walk away again. Victoria stepped forward instantly. This has gone far enough. Ethan turned toward her with a calmness that felt more dangerous than shouting ever could. Do not. His mother stared at him in disbelief. You are embarrassing yourself in front of half the city. Good. Victoria physically recoiled at the answer. Ethan's voice remained low and steady now, but Charlotte recognized the shift immediately. The controlled anger. The kind he buried for years beneath obedience and polished manners. Maybe I should have embarrassed myself years ago instead of letting you destroy my marriage. Gasps spread quietly through nearby guests. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly beside the staircase railing. Charlotte suddenly felt guilty again watching another woman absorb pain that was never entirely her fault. Vanessa had not manipulated anyone. She simply fell in love with a man who never healed properly. Ethan looked toward Vanessa then, and Charlotte saw genuine remorse in his expression. I am sorry. Vanessa gave a soft laugh without humor. I think we both know sorry stopped mattering about 20 minutes ago. Ethan lowered his head slightly. Vanessa's voice remained composed somehow despite the heartbreak visible beneath it. Did you ever love me? Ethan hesitated, and hesitation answered everything. Vanessa nodded slowly, as if confirming a truth she already suspected for months. That is what I thought. She glanced toward Charlotte standing protectively beside the twins. Then toward Ethan looking at those children like they were oxygen after years underwater. Vanessa swallowed carefully before speaking again. You should have told me you were still in love with her. Ethan's expression darkened with self-disgust. I did not realize how much until today. Charlotte looked away instantly because hearing those words hurt almost as much as they healed. Vanessa exhaled shakily before reaching up to remove the diamond engagement ring from her finger. The enormous stone caught chandelier light one final time before she pressed it quietly into Ethan's hand. Then do not marry me out of guilt. Ethan stared silently at the ring resting in his palm. Nearby photographers pretended not to capture the moment while absolutely capturing every second. Victoria stepped forward sharply. Vanessa, do not be emotional. Vanessa turned toward her with surprising calm. I am not emotional. Her voice softened painfully. I am humiliated. For the first time all afternoon, Victoria seemed to lose complete control of the situation unfolding around her. This family built everything you see here, she snapped toward Ethan. You are willing to throw it away for a woman who disappeared without explanation. Charlotte flinched slightly. Ethan noticed immediately. Stop blaming her for the consequences of your cruelty. Victoria's expression hardened. Without me, you would have lost your company after your father died. Maybe. Ethan's eyes moved toward Noah and Lily again. But at least I would not have lost 5 years with my children. The sentence landed brutally inside the silence. Charlotte looked down quickly as tears burned behind her eyes. Ethan slowly crouched in front of the twins again. Can I ask you something? Noah nodded cautiously. Ethan smiled faintly despite visible emotion threatening to overwhelm him. What is your favorite thing to do? Noah brightened instantly. Football. And sharks, Lily added loudly. And pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Ethan laughed softly then. A real laugh this time. Small. Broken. Genuine. Charlotte had not heard that sound in years. Lily stared curiously at his tuxedo. You look sad in your fancy clothes. Ethan blinked in surprise. Children truly missed nothing. Do I? Lily nodded seriously. Mom says clothes cannot fix lonely people. Charlotte nearly died from embarrassment. Ethan looked toward her slowly, and something fragile passed between them beneath the chandeliers. Recognition. Memory. Love that somehow survived despite everything destroyed around it. The wedding planner approached again nervously from the ballroom entrance. Mr. Calloway, she whispered carefully, the guests are waiting. Ethan stood slowly this time, without looking toward the ballroom at all. Instead, he looked directly at Charlotte. I do not want them anymore. Charlotte's breath caught painfully. Ethan, his voice lowered. Not if having them means losing you again. The entire lobby stopped breathing. The words hung inside the marble lobby with terrifying finality. Not if having them means losing you again. Charlotte felt the air leave her lungs so suddenly she had to steady herself against the edge of a nearby table. Draped in white orchids. Around them, wedding guests stood completely motionless now beneath the chandelier light, no longer pretending this was anything except the collapse of one life and the painful rebirth of another. Ethan stared directly at Charlotte as if nobody else existed. Not the cameras. Not the whispers. Not the billion-dollar wedding unraveling around them. Just her. After all these years, just her. Charlotte swallowed hard against the emotion climbing dangerously into her throat. Ethan, she whispered softly, do not say things you cannot take back. Ethan stepped toward her immediately. I have spent 5 years taking back the wrong things. The sentence hit with brutal honesty. Charlotte saw it clearly now. The exhaustion behind his eyes. The regret. The crushing realization that every success he achieved after losing her had felt emptier than the one before it. Victoria moved sharply between them before the moment could deepen further. Enough. Her voice cracked like ice through the silence. You are not throwing away your future over nostalgia and guilt. Ethan's entire expression darkened instantly. This is not guilt. Victoria laughed bitterly beneath the chandeliers. Then what is it? Because this woman disappeared from your life for years and suddenly arrives with children at your wedding. Charlotte flinched visibly. Ethan noticed immediately. Stop talking about her like she trapped me. Did she not? Victoria snapped back. You had responsibilities, Ethan. Expectations. An empire depending on you after your father died. Ethan stared at his mother with an expression Charlotte had never seen before. Not anger exactly. Clarity. Dad died believing money mattered more than happiness. Victoria's face hardened. Your father built everything for you. No, Ethan shook his head slowly. He built it for himself. And you wanted me to sacrifice everything else protecting it. Victoria looked genuinely stunned hearing the words spoken aloud. Because in all the years Ethan Calloway obeyed his family's expectations, he had never once challenged the foundation holding their world together. Until now. Noah tugged lightly on Charlotte's hand. Mommy, he whispered nervously. Are we in trouble? Charlotte knelt beside him immediately despite her own shaking hands. No, sweetheart. She brushed soft blonde hair away from his forehead carefully. None of this is your fault. Ethan watched the moment silently. Charlotte comforting their frightened son while still trying to protect everyone else in the room from further pain. Even now, even after everything. Lily looked toward the ballroom entrance where guests still waited beyond towering white floral arrangements and glowing candlelight. Are they still having the wedding? The innocence in her voice shattered whatever composure remained in the room. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly nearby. Then slowly, she stepped fully forward for the first time since returning the engagement ring. No, sweetheart, she answered gently before Ethan could. I do not think they are. Lily looked confused. Because of us. Vanessa's expression softened instantly. No, she crouched slightly to Lily's level despite the ivory silk of her gown spreading across the marble floor around her. Because sometimes adults pretend they want the wrong things for too long. Charlotte felt tears sting behind her eyes unexpectedly. Vanessa looked toward Ethan then, and for the first time all afternoon, there was no bitterness in her face anymore. Only sadness. You should have gone after her years ago. Ethan lowered his eyes briefly, shame flooding across his features. I know. Vanessa inhaled slowly before turning toward Charlotte. For what it is worth, her voice trembled slightly. I do not think he ever stopped loving you. Charlotte physically stopped breathing, hearing the words aloud from another woman. Ethan looked up sharply, but Charlotte could not meet his eyes yet, because part of her still remembered too vividly what loving Ethan Calloway had once cost her. Victoria straightened furiously beside them. This is absurd. Her diamonds flashed coldly beneath the chandelier light as she turned toward Ethan again. You are humiliating this family in front of half the city. Ethan finally looked at her with complete calmness. Good. Victoria blinked in disbelief. Ethan continued quietly. Maybe this family needed humiliation. The sentence landed brutally. Several nearby guests looked away instinctively, because deep down, everyone understood truth when they heard it. Ethan turned fully toward the ballroom entrance, then where hundreds of wealthy guests waited inside beneath flowers, music, and false expectations. He inhaled once slowly before speaking to the wedding planner, still clutching her clipboard nervously nearby. Cancel the ceremony. The young woman nearly dropped the clipboard. Sir. Ethan's voice remained steady. The wedding is over. Gasps rippled openly through the lobby now. Phones appeared again despite desperate attempts at discretion. Somewhere behind the ballroom doors, confusion immediately spread among guests, realizing something catastrophic had happened. Victoria stared at her son like she no longer recognized him. You cannot be serious. Ethan looked toward Charlotte and the twins standing together beneath the warm chandelier glow. I have never been more serious in my life. Charlotte's chest tightened painfully, because she believed him. That was the dangerous part. After everything, after all the silence and heartbreak and years spent convincing herself she no longer needed him. One look at Ethan standing there choosing them publicly destroyed every defense she built. Noah shifted nervously beside her. Does this mean Daddy is staying? The question shattered Ethan completely. Charlotte saw it happen in his face instantly. 5 years stolen by fear and manipulation collapsing into one tiny hopeful sentence from a little boy who still wanted his father anyway. Ethan crouched slowly in front of Noah again. His voice came out rough with emotion. If your mom lets me, he paused, swallowing hard. I would like to spend the rest of my life making up for what I missed. Charlotte closed her eyes instantly as tears finally slipped free. Because some promises arrived too late, and somehow still mattered anyway. The ballroom dissolved into chaos almost immediately after Ethan canceled the ceremony. Wedding guests poured into the marble lobby in clusters of whispered confusion while hotel staff hurried nervously between towering floral arrangements and abandoned champagne trays. Expensive heels clicked sharply across polished floors. Camera flashes burst near the entrance despite security attempting to contain the disaster unfolding inside one of Sydney's most elite weddings. Yet in the center of all the noise, Ethan saw only Charlotte and the twins. Everything else had become background. Victoria stood rigid beneath the chandelier light, her silver gown shimmering coldly while decades of control slipped through her fingers in real time. You are making the biggest mistake of your life, she said quietly to Ethan. Her voice no longer carried anger now, only desperation. Ethan looked at her calmly. No. His eyes drifted toward Noah and Lily standing beside Charlotte. The biggest mistake of my life already happened 5 years ago. Charlotte felt her throat tighten painfully hearing the words. Victoria followed his gaze toward the children with visible frustration. They are children, Ethan. This emotional fantasy will not survive reality. Noah frowned immediately. We are real. Several nearby guests visibly reacted to the sentence. Ethan crouched beside Noah instantly. Yes, you are. His voice softened. And I am sorry nobody told you that enough before today. Charlotte looked away quickly as emotion threatened to overwhelm her again. Because Ethan already sounded like a father. Natural, protective, gentle in ways she remembered too well from the beginning of their marriage before fear and pressure slowly hollowed him out. Vanessa stepped toward Charlotte quietly while the chaos continued around them. Can we talk? Charlotte hesitated before nodding softly. They moved a small distance away near one of the enormous lobby windows overlooking Sydney Harbor, now glowing silver beneath approaching evening rain. The city lights had begun reflecting across the water outside, blurred softly through the glass. Vanessa folded her arms carefully across herself, suddenly looking far less like a socialite bride and far more like a wounded woman trying to hold dignity together in public. I hated you for about 10 minutes, she admitted with a faint sad smile. Charlotte blinked in surprise. Vanessa sighed softly. Then I realized you were not the person who lied to me. Charlotte swallowed carefully. I never wanted to hurt you. I know. Vanessa glanced briefly toward Ethan kneeling beside the twins several meters away. Noah was showing him something animatedly with his hands while Lily leaned against Ethan's shoulder, completely comfortable already. Vanessa's expression softened painfully. I think part of me always knew he belonged somewhere else. Charlotte followed her gaze instinctively. Ethan looked transformed beside the children. Lighter somehow, like someone finally breathing normally after years underground. Vanessa laughed quietly beneath her breath. He has smiled more in the last 15 minutes than he has in our entire relationship. The truth of it hit Charlotte hard because she noticed it too. Ethan used to smile constantly before his father died. Before Callaway Group became his entire identity. Before loving Charlotte started feeling like another responsibility he might fail. You loved him, Charlotte said softly. Vanessa nodded once. Unfortunately, they shared the smallest sad smile between them. Then Vanessa reached gently for Charlotte's hand. Do not waste this second chance if he earns it. Charlotte's chest tightened instantly. That is a very big if. Vanessa looked toward Ethan again. Maybe. Her voice softened. But I have never seen him fight for anything the way he is fighting for you right now. Nearby, Victoria spoke sharply with several board members who had begun arriving from inside the ballroom after hearing fragments of the scandal spreading through the hotel. Charlotte noticed panic creeping beneath the older woman's controlled expression now. Not over heartbreak, over reputation, stocks, headlines, public humiliation. Ethan stood slowly after helping Lily fix the crooked bow in her hair. The tenderness of the gesture nearly destroyed Charlotte. He approached her carefully while Noah stayed close beside him carrying Ethan's abandoned wedding handkerchief like unexpected treasure. Can we talk privately? Ethan asked softly. Charlotte hesitated. Every instinct told her to. Protect herself. Protect the children. But Noah looked up at her hopefully, while Lily already held Ethan's hand like it belonged there. Charlotte nodded finally. Ethan led them toward a quieter corridor near the hotel's private lounge where noise from the ballroom faded behind thick cream-colored walls and soft golden lighting. Rain tapped gently now against the tall windows overlooking the harbor below. For several moments nobody spoke. Ethan stood facing Charlotte while the twins sat together on a velvet sofa nearby, sharing miniature desserts abandoned from the wedding reception preparations. The normalcy of it felt surreal. Ethan ran one hand slowly through his hair, emotion still visible across every exhausted feature. I do not know where to begin. Charlotte wrapped her arms tightly around herself. Neither do I. Ethan looked at the children again before lowering his voice. You raised them alone. Charlotte gave a faint nod. Mostly. Shame crossed Ethan's face instantly. Charlotte, do not. She inhaled shakily. Please do not apologize for things neither of us can change now. But I should have been there. His voice broke slightly. For all of it. Charlotte looked away toward the rain-streaked windows. There were nights Noah had fevers, and I was terrified to fall asleep in case something happened. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Charlotte. Lily used to ask why everyone else had fathers at school events. Her voice trembled now despite trying to stay steady. And every birthday I had to decide whether to tell them more about you or less. Ethan looked devastated. Completely devastated. Why did you not come back? The question came quietly. Not accusing. Broken. Charlotte stared at him for a long moment before finally answering. Because your mother convinced me loving me would destroy your life. Ethan physically recoiled hearing it aloud. She was wrong. Charlotte gave a small sad smile. You believed her too. Silence settled painfully between them. Because it was true. Ethan lowered himself slowly into the chair across from her, like the weight of those years had finally become unbearable. I loved you every single day after you left. Charlotte stopped breathing for half a second. Ethan looked directly into her eyes now. No billion-dollar image. No controlled executive mask. Just a man stripped completely raw by regret. And somehow, he whispered, glancing toward Noah and Lily beside the sofa. You still gave me the most beautiful part of your life anyway. Charlotte felt tears rise instantly because after everything, part of her still loved him enough for those words to matter. 3 weeks later, The ocean breeze carried the smell of salt and warm sugar through the open kitchen windows of Charlotte's coastal cottage, while early sunlight spilled across the wooden floorboards. The world outside had not forgiven them quietly. News outlets called Ethan's canceled wedding the scandal of the year. Business analysts predicted chaos for Callaway Group. Shareholders demanded answers. Victoria disappeared from public view after the board opened a formal review into her interference in both the company and Ethan's personal life. Vanessa left Australia for Europe with a dignity that made Charlotte respect her even more. But inside the little cottage beside the ocean, the story did not feel like a scandal. It felt like four people learning how to breathe in the same room without breaking. Noah stood on a kitchen chair in dinosaur pajamas, supervising pancake batter with the seriousness of a tiny judge. "You are mixing too fast," he told Ethan. "Mom says pancakes can feel panic." Ethan froze with the wooden spoon in his hand. "Pancakes can feel panic?" "Yes," Noah said firmly. "That is why hers are better." Charlotte tried not to smile near the coffee machine. Lily sat cross-legged on the counter beside a bowl of strawberries, humming to herself while sunlight caught in her blonde curls. Ethan glanced at Charlotte over Noah's head, sleeves rolled to his elbows, flour dusting his navy sweater. He looked nothing like the man from business magazines. No assistants, no cameras, no empire standing behind him. Just a nervous father trying to earn trust one ruined pancake at a time. The first week after the wedding had been harder than anyone admitted. Lily ran toward Ethan as if she had been waiting for him. Her entire life, which frightened him because her faith felt undeserved. Noah watched him carefully, asking small questions that landed like stones in Ethan's chest. "Where were you on my birthdays? Did you know I like sharks? Did you ever look for us?" Charlotte kept her distance too, not because she wanted to punish him, but because a heart that had survived by closing itself did not open simply because someone finally knocked. So Ethan stopped trying to fix 5 years with speeches. He showed up, quietly, consistently. School pickup, bedtime stories, doctor appointments, burnt pancakes, awkward silences. He listened when Charlotte was angry. He stayed when Noah pulled away. He apologized without asking the children to comfort him afterward. Slowly, the cottage learned the sound of his footsteps. "Daddy," Lily asked suddenly, swinging her legs from the counter, "are you still rich?" Ethan laughed softly while flipping a pancake too early and folding it into a tragic half-moon. "Apparently." Noah sighed. "You ruined it." Charlotte laughed before she could stop herself. Ethan looked up instantly, and for one brief second the kitchen fell into the old warmth they had lost. Rain outside a cafe window, cheap coffee, two people who once believed love would be enough. Charlotte looked away first, but she was still smiling. Ethan placed the ruined pancake on Noah's plate. Perfection is overrated. Noah inspected it, then took a bite. "It still tastes good." Ethan's expression softened. "That sounds like something your mother would say." Charlotte felt the words settle somewhere tender inside her. For years she had feared the children would inherit bitterness from the story that created them. Instead, they had learned gentleness. Not because life had been gentle with them, but because Charlotte had refused to let pain become their first language. Later that afternoon, she found Ethan alone on the weathered deck while Noah and Lily chased each other barefoot across the sand below. The sea stretched endlessly blue beneath the autumn sky. Ethan sat forward with his elbows on his knees, watching the children as if he still could not believe the world had trusted him with anything so precious. Charlotte handed him a mug of tea. "You disappeared. Just thinking. Dangerous habit." He smiled faintly, then looked back toward the beach. "I missed so much." There it was again, the grief that visited every happy moment. Charlotte leaned against the railing beside him. "You are here now." "I know." Ethan swallowed. "But being here now does not erase not being there then." Charlotte looked at him carefully. That was the difference. The old Ethan would have tried to bury pain under money, apologies, or promises. This Ethan let the truth stand between them without dressing it up. "No," she said softly. "It does not." Ethan nodded, accepting the answer instead of fighting it. "I spoke to the board this morning. I am stepping back for a while." Charlotte turned toward him. "Ethan, I am not abandoning the company," he said quietly, "but I am done letting it decide who I am allowed to love. I have lawyers handling Victoria. I have people who can run meetings. What I do not have is another 5 years to waste proving myself to people who only respect sacrifice when it benefits them. Below them, Lily waved both arms from the beach. Noah pretended not to smile as a wave chased his ankles. Ethan lifted a hand back, and the tenderness in the gesture made Charlotte's throat ache. I know I do not deserve another chance, he said. Charlotte looked down at their children. This is not only about deserving. I know. His voice lowered. It is about earning. The answer was so simple that it hurt. Charlotte had once needed Ethan to choose her loudly. Now she needed him to choose them steadily. Not in front of guests. Not beneath chandeliers. Not because scandal forced his hand. Every ordinary day after the applause and outrage ended, Ethan turned toward her. I loved you when I married you. I loved you when you left. I loved you every day after that. But loving someone in silence is not enough. Love that never protects, never speaks, never stays when staying is hard. That is not love people can live inside. Tears stung Charlotte's eyes before she could stop them. For years, she had wanted those words. Not because they erased what happened. Because they named it honestly. I was afraid too, she whispered. I should have trusted you enough to tell you about the twins. Ethan shook his head gently. Fear does strange things to people who have already been hurt. Silence settled between them, but this time it was not empty. It held the sound of waves, children laughing, gulls crying overhead, and two wounded people finally telling the truth without trying to win. Ethan reached for her hand against the railing. Slowly, carefully, not demanding forgiveness, not claiming a happy ending, just asking permission to begin. Charlotte looked at their fingers resting together while the wind moved softly around them. 5 years ago, she thought losing Ethan meant the end of her story. Then she thought surviving alone meant she no longer needed anyone. But watching Noah and Lily run beneath the endless Australian sky, she finally understood the lesson pain had been trying to teach her all along. Love is not proven by how loudly someone says they cannot live without you. It is proven by whether they are brave enough to protect you when it costs them something. Family is not built by blood, money, or a perfect public image. It is built by the people who keep showing up after the beautiful words are over. Charlotte tightened her hand around Ethan's, just once. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a door. And for the first time in 5 years, Ethan Calloway understood that the most valuable thing he had ever been offered was not an empire, a name, or a second chance handed to him easily. It was the chance to earn his way home.